How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on Tuesday, September the 3rd, to bring you guys some more coverage of the NFL leading up into the first couple games of the NFL regular season. We're going to start talking about some of those games coming up on Thursday and Friday specifically with some of these segments. The first one covering that Brazil game on Friday, the first ever NFL game to take place in South America. All very exciting, but there are some concerns starting to come up amongst some of the players, so we're going to get into what some of those concerns are. And also, in this first part of the show, we're going to get into looking at some of the games from all of Week 1, and I'll give you guys my top 5 must-watch games of Week 1, which games I'm most looking forward to watching this week, plus some honorable mentions as well, because there are a lot of good games. It was hard to pick just 5, so that's coming up in the first part of the show. More to come as we go through the rest of this episode, but before we do start, guys, the NFL is starting. I just mentioned that. More games are coming up, more coverage around these games, which brings up more of an opportunity to discuss and debate some of these things we see over the weekend. So with that being the case, now more and more, I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. I'd love for you guys to share your opinions, your comments, or any questions that you may have on any of the live shows that we do across this network. And it always adds a lot with your guys' insight and input. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your messages stand out in any of our live shows, make sure to go check out our new feature, which is the Super Chat feature that you guys can find at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat with this new feature. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. But if you do prefer the old method, that is still available. The old tip and donations link you could still use at GSMCPodcast.net. You can still use that with any comment or question if you may have it. With that, we couldn't do this show without your amazing support, and we're always so thankful for you guys for your interactivity with these shows and also just being part of our community. But now we can jump into the first segment, right? The Brazil game. I think one of the most exciting games to look forward to this week, not just because of the environment, the setting of everything, right, but because we have two great teams playing on Friday. The Packers and the Eagles will be featuring in the NFL's first ever game in South America. That, along with some of the other international games, a few in London and also a few in Germany. It's groundbreaking moves from the NFL, but with all the excitement from us fans, right? Getting a game in a different location, for fans in a new environment, in a whole new country, whole new continent. From the players' perspective, there does seem to be some concerns with this game, specifically this time around from some Philadelphia Eagles players, one of them being Darius Slay. During one of the recent episodes of his podcast, Big Play Slay, Darius Slay wasn't shy about sharing some of his displeasures about going down to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and playing in the first ever game there for the NFL. He wasn't too shy about sharing his comment pretty much. He said, "I do not want to go down to Brazil. You want to know why? I'm going to tell you why. They already told us not to leave the hotel. They told us we can't do too much because the crime rate is crazy." I'm like, NFL, why would you want to send us somewhere with a crime rate this high? And he also tacked on after that he told his family to not even bother to show up there because he is, again, just most likely going to stay in his hotel. And this statement follows up an earlier one from one of his teammates in A.J. Brown, who sort of explained the warning that the NFL gave the players, all of the players obviously participating in this game, about the do's and don'ts while they're down there in Brazil. A.J. Brown commented beforehand, and he said, "We had a meeting, and there were a whole bunch of do's and don'ts, so I'm just trying to go down there and win a football game and come back home. But after hearing all this stuff, I'm probably going to be in my room." And it doesn't sound great from a player's perspective, if you're looking at it and you're trying to expand the game, obviously, with these international games, but obviously the players are the product, right? They are the ones on the field putting on the show and everything. And in an ideal world, right, you'd want the players to be happy about going and expanding the game everywhere, bringing it to new areas and things like that, right? But these two guys aren't the first ones to mention it. Josh Jacobs back in June was another player on the other side of things to bring up his concerns, and he was a little bit more, I think, overreactive with some of the things that he communicated that the NFL was telling them, but later he sort of apologized for it. But now you get some of the similar concerns from the Eagles players, and again, it doesn't look great if you're on the outside looking in, if the players are a little bit unsure about it. And I think from one point of view, I think that just comes from the speculation, the worries, the uncertainty, right? I don't know how many of these players have gone down to South America or anything. I don't know how many have actually been in Brazil or anything like that, how much they know about the sporting, athletic culture down there with mainly soccer, right? All of that wrapped up into one has to do with some of the uncertainty and some of the worries, right? Obviously, from these NFL players. And again, going back to that point about soccer, the fandom experience down there, if you haven't caught a game in any league or tournament down there, it's very same and very different from what it is in the NFL or any sporting event here, because I think it's a little bit more of a controlled chaos here in the NFL. You have some places that get very loud. You see some fans go over the top here in the NFL or in any sporting event here in the United States, but down there it gets a little bit more, I'm going to say hostile, but I mean it in the nicest way possible, if that makes sense. You know, it's a little, just exactly that, a little bit more just chaotic, it might seem, from anybody who's just watching it for the first time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that with the NFL, because I don't know how many football fans there are down there in Brazil. There could be a lot, and then we could be seeing, one, in a positive way, a lot of fans that are right excited about the NFL, but in another sense, it could get to a point where it might overwhelm a lot of people because they're not really used to it or they don't really know what the culture is down there. So all of that is sort of wrapped up into this concern and main problem that you have with these players. Just one, traveling. I don't know how many hours it is, but it is a long flight going directly from wherever they're flying from all the way down to South America. So that's one thing, right? Taking that long trip, and now you're in a completely different place. You don't know the language or anything like that, and you might want to get to know it, but again, going outside and trying to explore those areas around just outside of football is a little bit concerning, and seeing some of the players say that they're just going to stay in their room doesn't really convey a positive message with how the NFL has planned this, or how maybe they're not considering the player's point of view in a lot of their decisions. And news to everybody, that's not always how the NFL does their business, right? They don't necessarily always concern the player's point of view, but in this whole, I think, plan, this, I would say, 4 to 5 year plan now that the NFL is trying to expand their game out globally now, the player's perspective isn't necessarily the first priority, right? I think most people would admit that. And what sort of message does this, convey about the NFL? I think mainly that they are very committed to expanding their game globally, right? You have not only these South American games, but they're talking about maybe having some in Canada, back in Mexico City. I know they're going to have one in Spain next year as well. There's talks about Australia, Ireland, Italy, I've heard as well. There's a bunch of different places where this is starting to expand to, and obviously it's very intriguing for the NFL to expand it as much as possible. But I think another message that this sort of conveys is that they kind of speed this process up a little bit and might sort of plan it a little bit too early, if that makes sense, for some of the players, and for some real deep dives into how to get the best experience for everybody, right? Not just the fans, but the broadcast and the players as well. You want everybody to have a positive experience about this, right? Because if some things go wrong, like in this Brazil game, the game itself is obviously going to be watched by millions of people, right? But there's also going to be some looking at how everything goes smoothly with the hotels or the travel from the hotel to the stadium, the field conditions, the locker rooms. And then once the game actually starts, you hope that nothing goes wrong during the game that, I don't know, maybe stalls it or just doesn't look as well as maybe a game played at Lincoln Financial or Lambeau Field or something like that, right? All those little things are going to be looked at and analyzed, and then afterwards say it isn't a great experience from the players. You don't want a case where the players come back and they're asked about it and they just, trash it or something like that or speak honestly about it in not the brightest of lights, so to say. So that's something that ideally the NFL wants to avoid, and you want everything to go smoothly. And there are going to be some problems I'm anticipating, which comes with exploring these new areas, right? But I think overall, it is a good thing that they're expanding, but maybe I think it would be fair to say that they maybe arranged this a little bit too quickly without really knowing or informing a lot of the players of what could go down. They've tried to now, but I think even still, they haven't done it in the best way possible. And this could be a learning experience, obviously, from it. This is one of the first times they're really trying to grow it out to a different place they've never been to. So at the end of the day, they could just try to learn from it. It's going to happen anyway. It's not like the NFL really is too concerned, honestly, about what the players are going to say at the end of the day, but it's really going to come down to, how everything goes smoothly with the game. There's no problems with anything like that. And if that happens, this is just going to speed up the process a little bit more with those games in Spain, Australia, Ireland, and how it all gets ironed out. It's going to be a learning process from this Brazil experience, and maybe there could be some more South American games to come in the near future, but that is, I guess, a little bit of the negative side with this. The players are feeling a little bit uneasy about it. I'm sure they're probably going to travel either tomorrow or I'm assuming tomorrow because the game's on Friday. So it is gearing up. We are getting closer and closer to the start of these games. And on the topic of those games, we're going to go into our next segment after this short break. But in that next segment, we're going to talk about some of the most anticipated games I have on my schedule of games that I think are going to be the most must-watch games of Week 1. I picked 5 from the slate of Week 1 games. I also included some honorable mentions. There's some good ones, and I'm going to provide those to you once we return from this break. So don't go anywhere. A lot more to cover on today's show. We'll be right back.